Good evening and welcome. My name is Connie St. John, and I have the honor of serving as the board president for Women in Film and Video. So thank you all for being here. And thank you to DCTV with Julia in the back for hosting us once again. Thank you, Julia. They are such a wonderful partner and a phenomenal resource for the media making industry. If you don't know, you need to find out. As many of you know, you do know that WIFV is celebrating its 45th anniversary. Our official birth date was September 9th, 1979. And so we kicked off our anniversary with a really cool party last September. Many of you were there, you know, 70s themed party. We did the whole thing, but we're not done. We've decided to celebrate the whole year until this coming September. Tonight's panel, Will AI Enhance or Assault Equity, is part of that celebration. This second of 4 panels acknowledges the growing use of technology and its impact on our talented members, as well as its evolving role in our democracy. When we planned this panel, we wanted to focus on the unintended consequences as well as benefits of AI. However, the use of AI has taken on a different meaning as news reports continue to surface that AI is being used to trim the government. From mass layoffs to the reallocation of taxpayer dollars, AI is being used to make decisions that will impact all of our futures and not just as filmmakers. An attack on democracy was our first panel, and in a twist of reality, this conversation is a continuation of that topic. But let's focus on film and media making. First, let me introduce you to our wonderful panelist and moderator. Rachel Kim is VP Legal Policy and Copyright Counsel at the Copyright Alliance, where she has advocated for and worked on education and outreach to the creative community on a variety of domestic and international copyright policy issues, including AI, CCB regulations, Copyright Office, modernization, regulations, registration practices, and other copyright and policy initiatives. Prior to rejoining the Copyright Alliance in 2021 to support its mission to protect and strengthen the rights of creators and copyright owners, she was of counsel at CBS Studios and a law clerk and contract specialist at NBC Universal, advising and working on a variety of legal and business issues arising from television production, of which there are many, as we know. She was also a legal fellow and intern at the Copyright Alliance, an intern at the National Music Publishers Association, and an intern at the Legal Aid Justice Center. Rachel earned her JD from George Mason University. Please welcome Rachel. Joe Jacquie is founder of Crimes of the Art Productions. I love the name of that company, Crimes of the Art Productions. He's also a filmmaker who has made 30 shorts, and probably 30 plus shorts, I would guess, knowing him. He's currently hard at work on his first feature, Domicidal, a haunted house movie where the haunting is caused by hacked smart home technology based on a script that was in the first cohort of the WIFV Narrative Script Development Fellowship and a nickel quarterfinalist. Joe also has a PhD in computer science and has decades of experience working with both giant tech companies and internet startups. Please welcome Joe. Judith Snyderman is a committee member, Gen AI Best Practices for the Archival Producers Alliance, which recently released guidelines for using generative AI in documentaries. She is also a freelance producer with credits across digital media, broadcast, and non-broadcast sectors. She specializes in archival image research, historic footage, and rights clearances, and has written about the evolution of media technology. She is a valued board member of WIFV. Please welcome Judith. And finally, tonight's moderator, Hadley Green, is an award-winning video journalist at the Washington Post, where she covers the DC region and national news. Previously, she worked as a staff photojournalist at the Salem News and as a multimedia journalist with WBUR, Boston's NPR news station. Her visual journalism has also been published with New York Times, The Atlantic, and PBS North Carolina. Hadley's work has been recognized by the National Press Photographers Association, the White House News Photographers Association, the Boston Press Photographers Association, and College Photographer of the Year International. Hadley holds an MA in Visual Communication from the UNC Chapel Hill Hussman School of Journalism and Media, where she was a Roy H. Park Fellow. She also has a degree in International Relations from Tufts University. Please welcome Hadley.
Picture of the Salem News.
So we're gonna start our discussion by watching a brief clip from The Information Apocalypse, a short film with an AI and digital forensics expert. This clip is courtesy of Knowable magazine and Bridget Hunnicutt. Bridget is a director, producer, and creative media executive, and of course, a wonderful WIFV member. We're gonna see how images and audio are manipulated, which will set the stage for Hadley's Q&A.
We are in an information apocalypse. And the fact is that the majority of people now get their news from Facebook and from social media. That should freak everybody out. "20 years ago, my lab started focusing on developing these forensic techniques to authenticate content. And back then it was a niche field. And something bizarre and amazing happened in 20 years, which is the internet exploded, cell phones, mobile devices exploded, social media exploded. And then we started seeing mis and disinformation designed to disrupt democratic elections and sow civil unrest, non-consensual pornography, and small and large-scale fraud that are having a huge impact on our economy. Photo manipulation is not new. If you look back through history, Stalin famously airbrushed people out of photographs. Mao did it, Hitler did it. They just literally would take images where they were their friends one day and they fell out of favor and they would just vanish from the photographs. But when Stalin did it, there was probably 10 people in the world that could do it. So it was in the hands of a relatively few. And of course, we didn't have the distribution mechanism that we have today.
I genuinely love the process of manipulating people online for money.
There are 4 wings of deepfakes: text, audio, image, and video. We now have the ability to write a headline and then hand that headline over to a computer system and it will write an article, a full-blown article, top to bottom, based on the headline. And it's really good. And so why should we worry about that? Well, imagine I want to create misinformation campaigns and I can train these things to write articles in a certain voice and I can carpet bomb the internet with these things. In the audio domain, we have technology for synthesizing speech in a person's voice. So you would record a couple of hours of me speaking and then you would do what's called text to speech. I would type and the computer will synthesize me saying anything you want me to say. We have technology that will synthesize images of people who have never existed. There's this amazing website out there called thispersondoesnotexist.com. And when you go to that site, true to its name, it will show you an image of a person who doesn't exist. Man, women, different races, different ages, just incredible glasses, facial hair, incredibly well done. And we've already seen the first nefarious uses of that technology in the creation of fake profiles on Twitter, on YouTube, on Facebook, and on LinkedIn to either start to promote fake news, to sow civil unrest, to commit fraud. And then perhaps the biggest threat is the fake video.
Hi, I'm Deepfake Bezos.
President Trump is a total and complete dipshit.
There's 3 types of deepfakes today. There's face swap, lip sync, and puppet master. So face swap, as the name suggests, I take a video of me talking and I put another person's face from about the eyebrows to the chin onto mine, frame after frame after frame after frame, and it looks like somebody else. The lip sync deepfake is where you take me talking like the way I'm doing right now, and you have a new audio track synthesized, and you simply replace my mouth to be consistent with that audio track. So I'll have been saying one thing, but the fake video is me saying something completely different.
NBC glad. Why? Fox TV jerks quiz PM.
And the Puppet Master deepfake, in some ways the biggest threat, you take a single static image of me, and then you have a Puppet Master sit in front of a camera and talk and move, and then my face gets animated according to their motions. And then of course you add the audio track to that. So you can see why people are concerned about the deepfake video in particular and the audio, because you can literally put words into people's mouths.
You see, I would never say these things, at least not in a public address, but someone else would. Someone like Jordan Peele.
Whether that's a presidential candidate saying something like, I've launched nuclear weapons, or something racist or illegal, or whether it's a CEO saying our profits are down 10% and the stock market moves billions of dollars instantaneously, or anything in between those things.
Imagine this for a second. One man with total control of billions of people's stolen data, all their secrets, their lives, their futures.
And now, I am turning it over to you, Hadley.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to talk. According to researchers at the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, the rapid increase in AI-generated content has created a fundamentally polluted information system. Viewers don't always know what information is real and what information might be AI-generated. Is this a threat to democracy, and what needs to be addressed?
You know, I'm with the Copyright Alliance. We focus just solely on copyright issues. Digital replicas fall a little bit outside of that. But you'll see in sort of our membership, we represent everyone across the creative disciplines. So that includes actors and performers, sound recording artists. All of these people are very concerned about the potential of AI to replicate their voices, their likenesses, which aren't necessarily protected under copyright law or trademark law or sort of your traditional forms of IP. And so there are movements within Congress to get legislation passed so that we can protect against these sort of more harmful uses, you know, in the AI context. From the copyright perspective, in terms of, you know, your question regarding sort of democracy and the state of you know, things in the AI age, you know, we also represent news publishers. And I think a big part of, at least in the copyright world, the big fight that we're having is, you know, what is being used to train these AI models. Because what goes into these AI models is exactly what comes out of these AI models. I mean, there are user prompting that can generate different outputs, but typically, you know, what we say is quality in, quality out. And so, you know, when you're talking about a lot of the AI companies out there and a lot of the AI models, you know, they've trained on billions and trillions of works on the internet. And this can range anything from, you know, articles from respected publications, and news, you know, publications and media publishers, but it can also include, you know, Reddit posts and a lot of user-generated content as well. So for us in the copyright sphere, I think the case has always been, look, this is why copyright law exists. It allows this licensing framework whereby you can get quality content from trusted sources that you can train your AI algorithms and models to generate quality output. And that input, that training data you're using are creative works that are created by people. And so for, at least, you know, from our news publishers members, we've seen this argument made a lot about, this is not just about, you know, whether you can generate like an image of a unicorn from Stable Diffusion. This also has to do a lot with, as we saw in the video, you know, what you're able to manipulate AI to do in terms of writing articles and stuff like that. So we've always, you know, stressed that content has to come from somewhere, and it comes from creators and copyright owners, and it's done through copyright licensing traditionally.
And that kind of leads into another question I had. So if synthetic AI video is based on content that a model is being fed, like all of the things that you just listed, video, photos, text, news, stories, Reddit posts, could there be a world where synthetic AI video is considered real enough? Where is the line between AI video and maybe Judith could talk to this, maybe a realistic rendering of a historic scene
Right.
that's used in a film or a documentary?
Right, and that's exactly what the Producers Alliance, Archival Producers Alliance is working on a toolkit for that, because there aren't any standards and there aren't any, it's not like a copyright code to know what to do with. And if you're making a documentary or any nonfiction film, right, you know what is acceptable. And that's one part of it. The other part of it is, what is the role of filmmakers in being ethical and using AI ethically? Because one of the dangers is doing a historic recreation that's really good, but you somehow introduce into the system something that's not true. And it gets replicated and replicated and replicated, and you'll never get it out of the system. And so there's an ethical issue there that's really important. And then there's all the more practical questions, like what the heck are insurance people requiring if you've put AI in your film, AI elements in your film? What are they requiring to verify, right? And so there's, I don't know how many people, even if you're going to put some AI elements in there, are you thinking early enough about tracking all of the prompts that you wrote into all of the tools so that you can track back and make sure that they were, verify the facts that they were pulling from? So there's a lot, so, they're working on cue sheets to track that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and kind of taking a step back, how can creatives best leverage AI to their benefit? And what AI tools must creatives know how to use to stay ahead of the technology? And maybe we can play Joe's clips.
For Domicidal, we filmed Luna moths for a scene with a bug zapper. We then masked out the background with After Effects Rotobrush 2, but even with an AI-enhanced Rotobrush, it's hard to get a decent mask for something organic like a moth. But putting the masked footage through Runway added back details, replacing removed wing parts and making sure that the antennae were never lost. Following this two-step roto process made the final product look much better. We then built a bug zapper prop, filmed it, and used After Effects to layer it with moth footage and VFX. We passed that through Runway to change time of day and background and to create a more polished look for the prop. With this hybrid approach, we are getting closer to our vision for this scene.
Yeah.
Sure. Before I get to that, though, let me make a point about some of the things we've been talking about so far, and that is, none of the issues we're talking about are new. I mean, I don't know about any of you, but my understanding of what King Richard III was like has been heavily shaped by Shakespeare. What is kind of new about all of this stuff is the technology really speeds things along and makes the impact much more intense. It's like, you could always go down to the courthouse and find out what your neighbor's house cost, but now you can just go online into it. So, although the level of privacy is the same theoretically, the availability and the ease of it is much, much different. And that's what has happened with all of the technology stuff, everything with the internet. And it's true of all of these things. I mean, you know, people always lied. People always got in flame wars and letters to the editor columns. Now it happens like that. In terms of the tools that I've used here, I really used an approach that I've heard called the AI sandwich, where you feed something in the middle and then you generate something in AI and then you process it afterwards. So it's part of your whole flow. And this can be true whether or not you are doing like writing something. Maybe you know, I have done like grant proposals where I've written a draft, an initial draft, sent it through the AI, saw what it had to add, what it had to suggest, and then edited the output of that. So very much, like I said, the AI sandwich. The runway example there is another really good example where my wife built the bug zapper prop for me. I really like the bug zapper prop, but it was like, can we make it a little more polished? And the AI can then like add that, make it look like it's some brass monstrosity out of a Greek myth or something. So in terms of how you find the tools, hey, you can ask AI. And I mean, actually, you know, AI is really good at writing prompts for AI. And that is particularly important if you are working with video because it's expensive to generate a video clip. Each of those runway clips cost me essentially $1 for each 5-second clip. So you can imagine how expensive a whole movie would be. And there's a very random aspect to this. You enter your prompt, you don't know what's going to come out until it comes out. But Claude.ai, which is a text system, that's cheap. So I just ask Claude, I play AI sandwich with it to generate my prompts. Works great, and it comes up with things that I never would have thought of.
So kind of going back to what you were saying, you could argue that the film industry has been changing forever and that there were silent movies, and when noise or sound was introduced, the orchestra members that would play for the silent movies said, this is going to destroy our jobs, but now there is sound in movies and we could say that's a good thing. And so do you think that this is just another transformation in the media industry? Or if not, what seems different about this? You kind of touched on that, but.
Well, I mean, first of all, again, this is something that's been around for a long time. The whole point of technology is so you can do more with less. And that has been true since the first guy took a wheel and fired a bunch of guys who used to be carrying all of this stuff to market. AI seems to be accelerating. And I mean, you know, among the futurist community, there's this whole idea that we are approaching the point where the technology can enhance the technology. We're approaching the singularity. And everything is speeding up so fast. And that, I think, is the really scary part about it. And frankly, it's true of the entire internet, right? I mean, I have spent my career as one of those people building the internet and building all those applications of the internet. And sometimes I wonder if that's really been a good thing, if human beings are sufficiently advanced to deal with the speed of these technologies. But of course, people have been asking that question for, you know, at least ever since the Gatling gun.
And who do you think, maybe Judith or Rachel, who do you think is at risk of being left behind as AI advances?
Anybody who's not media literate. Sorry. Which is like a lot of people. Sorry.
No. I think, again, from the copyright perspective, these AI models were built on something. And that is creative works that have human creative expressions in them. And what AI is trying to do is replicate that. And that's why I think, you know, to the extent that I understand the AI technologies, and please feel free to correct me if I'm outdated in my understanding, because the technology, again, moves so fast. But, you know, for us, I think it really is the argument of you can't forget about the human creators upon which these AI models were built. Because moving forward, if you are going to, you know, replace these jobs, replace creators, I mean, there's going to be some sort of shift and movement that's inevitable and that results from advances in technology. That's something you cannot deny. But I think it really is about, how do we see the ecosystem as a whole, and how is AI contributing to it or taking away from it? And right now, as we see it from the copyright lens, AI companies are training their AI models without compensation credit to the creators upon which these algorithms were built, thereby not contributing back into that creative ecosystem. And I think that's what creators are most worried about, is that these AI models can generate output that would have taken some human hours and hours of labor to do. And, it is going to replace some jobs, but it is, how can we look at this ecosystem as a whole, where we see that human creativity is flourishing, and it's going to continue to flourish, I believe. I may be an optimist, but it's going to continue to flourish. But I think it really is about how can we use AI in a way that is a tool and not a replacement for human creativity, which I don't think it ever will be. It does lack that human touch. Maybe it'll advance to a very good point where it can do a lot of the work, but again, it's a replication of human expression. And I think, again, from the copyright perspective, there's this fear of, we're moving very fast, we're moving forward, and that's okay, but we need to also acknowledge that this was built on something that it's going to continue building on that, because, if you don't have any human creators anymore, what are you going to train your AI models on? Synthetic data? I mean, it's been shown that that's not very useful for the AI algorithms thus far. Again, these technologies are so fast evolving, and I think that's, to Joe's point, that's one of the fears, is AI technologies have just developed at scale that nobody has ever seen before. And I think it is kind of a moment where we need to hit the pause button and be like, okay, is this right? Like, is this how we're supposed to be developing? So again, from the copyright perspective, we kind of see ourselves as the canaries in the coal mine on this issue in particular of, hey, this is really important to look at, like how we're building this, how we're scaling this, how we're going to continue scaling this in the future, and how we're going to include creators sort of in that whole equation of the creative ecosystem.
Can I offer another perspective? I agree that the copyright issue is something that needs to be resolved, but the discussions I've heard about it feel an awful lot like the arguments that went on about sampling music for hip hop in the 90s. And it was a big issue at the time, and then they came up with processes to deal with it. And I think that they're going to come up with processes. Adobe, the Mosquito, I generated with Adobe Firefly, they license all the content they use to train their models. And all power to them. And there's people in the WIFV community who have been approached by Adobe to license their work. And that's great. And I think that's where we're going to end up with this thing. I think that, there's going to be some really interesting moral decisions from a lot of creators about whether or not they want to sample their stuff. But I mean, you're already seeing Ian Holmes' family licensing his imagery for the Alien movie this year. You're already seeing Tom Hanks licensing his images for after he is dead. Which again doesn't sound too much different from me than like the Tolkien heirs selling the rights to make Middle-earth stuff to Amazon. So yes, we very definitely need to solve this, but it really feels to me like 5-10 years from now, the copyright issue it's going to be a red herring.
You're a lot more optimistic than I am. I think we're very, very scared about sort of the attitude we've been getting from most AI companies, but there are responsible ones like Adobe, like Getty Images, like some other kind of AI companies and licensors who are developing their own in-house tools in a responsible way. And I think that's what the creative community kind of stands on the AI issue. It's not anti-AI, it's not anti-technology. Really, if you've mentioned like sampling in hip hop music, but like if you look at past technologies and sort of their interaction with the creative industries, they've always found a path forward.
Absolutely.
So, you know, with like the Napster era, with like music piracy being extremely rampant, you see new forms of like music streaming revenues and business models coming forward. But again, for us, the point is copyright law is what enables all that. So we need to make sure that we're respecting that framework and that foundation that we have that allows for these kinds of creative business models, of ways to find those creative solutions for it. But I agree, like licensing is sort of the solution forward. And you know, our hope, again, I'm so glad you're more optimistic than I am, because I've been very pessimistic as of late.
Well, frankly, I am glad that you are pessimistic and that your group is pessimistic, because it's your pessimism that's going to lead to equitable solutions.
I hope so, yes.
Maybe we could pull up Judith's clip.
What is the purpose of your research?
To give history a second chance.
Today, the Vatican and the United Nations have announced Project Reckoning, an unprecedented collaboration to reunite the world.
For the first time in history, we will grant historians, appointed by the UN, unlimited access to the Vatican archives. With outside help, we will embrace what the Germans call Erinnerungskultur, a culture of remembrance and accountability. Only by fully acknowledging the past sins of our faith can we lead a world in crisis into a new world of Christ.
I found a secret document. It's about the death and resurrection of an archangel called Jesus, and it was written before the time of Christ. It has everything: the trial, the passion, the crucifixion. This proves beyond any doubt that the most influential human being in the history of this planet never existed. And they have known about it for 2,000 years.
You were supposed to bring the world together, not throw it into chaos.
Meanwhile, a teenage girl from Ohio rallies millions worldwide for her global day of prayer, promising to pray Jesus back to earth.
Is this hope or is this madness?
The whole world is collapsing back to the supernatural.
So it's an all AI movie, and that's the trailer, all AI trailer for it, and it's already like a year or two old. So, I mean, some of the people things are still a little squirrely, but but it keeps getting better. And if you're a documentary filmmaker on a shoestring and you have to do a historical recreation, how does that not make you say, should I rent a place and a mansion and go and recreate this with actors and all that, or should I synthesize it, you know? So I think it's a good question, and I think there's a place for it, but like you were saying, I think that the new creators have to go beyond just synthesizing things. I think something new will burst upon the scene that will take it another level up, because it always does, you know? And I think this is where people are right now.
And how do you, and kind of goes to the committee that you're on and the guidelines that you're putting out, but how do we put guardrails on the circulation of AI content in films and TV and social media, especially on social media when those platforms are, as we know, loosely regulated these days?
So I think that the first word that comes to mind is transparency. And if you include Gen AI you have to be transparent about it, and not necessarily, it's not a one-size-fits-all way of crediting. I mean, in some cases, depending on the usage, it's got to be all the frames that are Gen AI should have a certain kind of look to them so they are easily identified, so as to not be manipulative or something. In another case, it may just simply be, having a credit that talks about the tool you use, so that if somebody wants to check where that thing is pulling from, they can do that, So I think transparency, and there's transparency to the viewers of your product, but there's also transparency to your distributors who have at this point, if you are going PBS, there's going to be different standards they're going to have on what you're allowed to do versus if you're going to someplace else, Netflix or whatever. So this is all in play. And I know you have to be involved in those conversations.
Yeah, I think more, what I'm hearing is this is transparency sort of on the output side of provenance, which are very important, I think, for a host of reasons that kind of expand beyond copyright and are very, important for ethical considerations and, whatnot. From the copyright perspective, we talk about transparency a lot, but I think we talk about it sort of, again, from the input side of things.
Right.
Of, you're a creator, your works have probably been scraped off the internet some way or another, and used in these huge, ginormous data sets to train these AI algorithms so that they can generate this kind of output. So the question becomes, well, are my works in those data sets? I don't really know. Are they not? And I think this is a question, moving forward as well. Again, from sort of the news publisher side of things too, when you're looking at this, it really, you're the news media publisher. You've published all of this hot news content, right? And it's just being appropriated by AI models, and the only evidence you have at the end of the day is, well, it kind of generated something that kind of looks like what I created, but that might not be enough, and you just need to know, are you taking my works? Is there an opportunity for me to go and approach you for a license or ask, that I be credited or compensated somehow? But there's no way of really knowing that unless you kind of try to manipulate an AI to generate output to kind of prove that point. And you see this in sort of 40 plus lawsuits that are going on in the courts right now of trying to figure out I think my rights have been infringed. I think you've taken my works, but I'm not quite sure. And now I have to go through this really lengthy process to try to eke it out of you sort of deal. So for transparency issues, we've talked about it a lot sort of from the input side of things. And I think, where that also becomes important is that, if you have transparency obligations where you don't, require AI companies to reveal their training data information for stuff they have licensed or stuff they already own.
Right.
You incentivize licensing, you incentivize better transactions and business relations between AI companies and the creative community. So there's ways to foster better relationships between tech and creative communities. And there are paths forward, but I think transparency is a huge part of that equation.
In thinking through the toolkit elements for guidelines for nonfiction producers, one of the things that came up is, maybe you're a researcher or you go in and you are using a tool and you generate something and you can be transparent about it. But what happens if you are procuring it from another company?
Exactly.
And are you holding them to be, how much are they revealing? So it gets really complicated. Especially if, because of all the lawsuits, I guess one thing is, at the very surface, it's like, hey, look what I can do. I can make a sizzle reel without spending a dime. But on the other hand, you've got these other sort of things you've got to think about, the consequences of, is anybody going to insure this thing? with all these unknown factors?
Well, and I like how you brought up the insurance point earlier as well. I think from sort of a rights clearance perspective too, you've got to be thinking about these things of, when I have an output, from a rights clearance perspective, who has cleared this? Do we need to clear this? Like, has this been cleared through the AI tool itself? Like, there's a lot of questions, and I think, that's why for us, that's why a licensing first approaching a copyright owner for permission is always going to be the better position, because you're not leaving with questions or gray areas of, is this okay or not? What am I using at the end of the day?
It's just awfully tempting.
It is. But I think a lot of AI companies, at least the very big ones, I think have taken the position of offering indemnification for their customers, at least for their enterprise customers too, because they're smart business people and they understand, like, hey, our customers kind of want this sense of security, a sense of I am using a tool and I won't be sued, by using it, kind of thing. But again, why even offer an indemnification provision at all when you can just license it in the first place? But I understand where, what they were doing. Yeah.
Do you think this is much different than when a filmmaker makes something that's a strong influence? I loved the movie The Substance this year. One of the things I liked about it as a film buff was playing Spot the Influence. Because, there was Kubrick and Cronenberg and David Lynch over and over again. So is that different?
Yeah, that's a great question, because again, from the copyright perspective, because copyright doesn't protect style, it's kind of hard to answer that from copyright law, because copyright law says style not protected. I don't care if it looks like Stanley Kubrick, like we're not going to protect it, kind of thing. So there are additional questions that come up like that, that make it really tricky. And I think that's where it kind of ties into the digital replica issues too, of, this is kind of this director-esque or that director-esque, right? But that's not quite protected under our traditional IP laws. So what is the step beyond that? And that's kind of the digital replicas issue of this is likeness, this is voice, this is something a little bit beyond just that particular human creative expression. So I don't know if that kind of answers your question. But
All art is repetition and replication and melding things together, but in this case, it's a machine doing that instead of an artist.
But it's a machine that the architecture of the machine is designed on the architecture of the human brain, which is what makes this so odd and tricky and complicated.
Yeah, and jumping off of that too, of again, just going back to the idea of the creative ecosystem. So one thing we stress a lot when talking about AI issues is the anthropomorphization of AI, and how AI learns, how it trains, how it can create in the style of this human being, right? But again, going back to the ecosystem picture of understanding that when humans learn, we buy textbooks, we go to a museum where it's been funded by someone who, enable the human creators to create this work, to distribute these books, to distribute these films, to make these films. Someone's paying the dollar at the end of the day. For us, again, in the AI context, that doesn't seem to happen. And I think that's our big point is, okay, AI can create in the style of, and maybe that's not protected under copyright, but again, what does this mean in the whole ecosystem of things that we're talking about, and sort of the dangers of saying, oh, AI learns just like humans do. Not quite. They don't pay for the books. They don't, they're not contributing back into that creative ecosystem.
And kind of on the money topic, I was curious what you all think if the rise of AI technology is a byproduct of capitalism in any way, and are there economic reasons why it's been adopted so quickly by so many companies, and what does that say about how our culture values creativity?
I think if Joseph Stalin had been able to get his scientists to create AI, he would have. I don't think it's a capitalism thing per se.
I-
I mean, depending upon how you define the Chinese, they're right up there.
I just think it's the whole, you were talking earlier about the whole progression of connected computers and this, which has accelerated, the acceleration from the time that the first two ARPA computers talk to each other. And it's just, it's on the trajectory. It wasn't that one day there was no AI and one day there was AI. You know, it's really a sliding thing, and it's always been like that. I think it always will. I think that's my optimism, is because it never has destroyed creativity before, and I don't see this as any different.
Well, the question is, are we going to reach the point where the AIs are capable of doing everything that the human brain is? And I think we are.
I think the human brain will evolve. If it doesn't evolve, it ain't going to survive.
Now, I do have a kind of an optimistic view, because speaking as a software developer, I assure you, building a software system is as much an act of creativity as making a film. And so we as human beings have created things that are capable of creating things. That seems really amazing to me. Sure, it has all of these problems, but
Ryan, what were you about?
we're an awesome species.
Well, I think we might have time for questions now.
You know, something that hasn't been touched on, and I am neither here nor there about this topic, I'll just say that for now, but I'm very curious with regards to the environmental impact that AI is having. I've read, and I cannot verify these sources, that it takes so much energy to be able to operate the AI technology that it in and of itself could destroy the planet. So I see Joe nodding. So if anybody wants to just comment on that, because I'm not quite sure what to believe from what I've read, I guess is my point.
I think that's an issue. I think prices will go down. I would rather see that energy being used on AI than mining Bitcoin. There's been a couple of things that I've read about lately where they're trying to experiment with sort of biological brain cells cloned out of human brains and building the AIs based on it. And if you think about it, a human brain is capable of all the capability of a human brain, and it operates on hamburgers. Well, not yours, Mark. But, you know, so a lot less energy. You know, I mean, things will get more efficient, but yeah, it's a real issue. It's a real problem.
So you do believe that things will, the efficiency of it?
I mean, you know, Moore's Law has been working for the last 50 years. We'll
Has
see.
anybody asked AI how to be more efficient?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and they're starting to use more AI, applying to AI, and yes, all of that stuff.
Harry.
Is it me? Yeah. Full disclosure, I'm still quill and ink, just so you know. Full disclosure. That first video, the piece we saw, scared the heck out of me.
Yeah.
How do we as people, watching television, watching a movie, watching a documentary, how do we know what we're seeing is true or what is generated that somebody made that person say? I think back to when I was a kid, back in the Stone Age, when you watched the news and you believed them. The names are going out of my head now, I cannot.
Hunnicutt.
Yeah. Cronkite.
Uncle Walter.
Barbara Walters, yes.
Uncle Walter. Oh, well, Uncle
You know,
too.
they were MS. That means you knew it was the truth.
But you didn't. You thought you did, but you didn't.
Okay.
And that's one of the big
Now
things.
when you watch TV and somebody is talking, how does one tell?
Come on, Sherry, you've been in an editing room. You know how much you can twist what the footage says.
Yeah, no, yeah, there's been a lot of green screen. yes, I know you do. But still, I mean, we're talking about talking heads who are giving information out. And how does the public sit there and go, gee, was that true? Was it not? I'm at the point where I don't believe anything I read on the internet. I just don't believe it. You know, my daughter says, go to MedMD, Mom, look. I go, no, I don't know that it's true what I'm reading. So what would you say? How does the public discern MS truth from what somebody's throwing out there?
Well, I think that it's true, and you know, I know you're in the narrative strand, but anybody who's been in the journalism strand knows that you check multiple sources, right? And I think that that is still a key thing that sort of got lost in the sauce over the past 15 years. So you know, it still works. It still works.
So if you hear something, you're saying, okay, that's one thing. Now let me go check it here and let me go check it there. Is that what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm. Yes, and really know where, you know, just like the transparency of how you're doing AI, you've got to be really careful about verifying the sources and seeing when it's from some association or organization, I always click the about button to see who are these people, you know, right? Because you never know. So
I would just add, at the Washington Post, if there's anything we publish that is showing like a story about AI, so that we're covering something that's AI, so we use an image that is AI just because we're covering it, not because we are creating that ourselves or something. But there's a big label on it that says this is AI, and there's lots of standards in the organization about if we come across a deep fake or something, how are we going to tell if it's real or not? And there would be a whole like investigation before we would verify to publish it. So, you know, places that hopefully have a reputable history of being reputable news organizations are going to take a lot of precaution and not spewing disinformation.
Yeah, and I think to that point of there's no law out there that requires transparency. Right. And so I think it becomes sort of this, as a consumer of media, of news, you're sitting there and you're like, well, what am I supposed to believe at the end of the day? And a lot of these transparency initiatives and movements have been voluntary. They've been industry-led. They've been through, you know, reputable media and news publishing houses, at least for the journalism side of things, right? But I think it can apply across all media sectors. Of you have companies who want to establish trust and goodwill with their consumers. Otherwise, they're not going to come and read their news and watch their movies and come, you know, watch their television shows, etc. So there's like a level of trust you do need to build with your public. But again, putting on my copyright hat, the ability for companies to do that, that's all included within the incentive structure that copyright law gives, right? That those exclusive rights to monetize, to be credited for your content that you make, that you are putting responsible practices into place, like labeling, like doing all these things, like ethically sourcing, fact checking, all of these things are possible because there are laws in place that reward that incentivize that creation. And I think, again, that's why from the copyright perspective, for us, it kind of just boils down to that too, of look, if you're not going to have laws in place that require transparency, and these are all voluntary initiatives, these companies and these creators need to be able to continue doing that. And you can't just continue undermining their right to make a living off of their craft and to do these things, right? And that's why from the copyright perspective, we care a lot about what's going on in the AI context, yeah.
Thank you. I was going to say, Sherry, you can't always check the source of any website. You got to go down and look at the small print. But I think a bigger problem is, now Fox is spelled F-A-U-X. For a lot of people, you know, but also, then also we have a president who's, when his lips are moving, it's always F-A-U-X. That kind of situation too. So it might not even be AI when it's not true, right? So that's another distinguished thing you have to figure out. Now people are just like, well, if it's this source, I'm going to believe it. If it's that source, I'm not going to believe it. And it's just all crazy.
Yeah.
I think that there is one of the biggest problems facing America today is that people don't trust figures of authority. But the corollary to that is figures in authority are often not trustworthy.
That's right.
And this is a major problem. At one point during lockdown, I found myself reading a book about the Sacklers and how they corrupted the FDA, and a book about the Afghanistan war and how three administrations in a row, Democratic and Republican, lied to us about what was going on in Afghanistan. And it's like, you read both of those and it's kind of like, maybe it's kind of understandable that people aren't trusting the medical authorities and government authorities about what to do with COVID.
Well, in the good old days, when Uncle Walter was the voice of truth, he did a good job, but it was a limited, it was one, they were doing their best, right? But it was still limited. And, you know, a lot of people credit or not credit, but say that the end of the Vietnam War was because when Uncle Walter changed his mind, it all went to...
But I mean, Vietnam and then Watergate is really a big pivot point in terms of public trust.
So this one is probably for you, Rachel. My understanding is, so a good friend of mine who fell in love with ChatGPT early on, early adopter, and I was looking to do summaries of my scripts because I now license my scripts to my stage plays, to other places. And so he said, oh, just put it in ChatGPT, it'll spit out a summary. Well, the first one was too long, so it didn't do it, thankfully. But then I tried a skit instead of a full play, and it did give me, and wasn't what I wanted. He said, oh, just tell it, make it a little warmer, make it romantic, or give it more, and you do all the things. So I did the things. But then I read at the very bottom, anything that you upload into it, it can use going forward. So you're kind of losing any exclusivity that you might have. Is that actually, I mean, I read it, but did I read it correctly?
I think, I haven't read the terms of conditions for each of these AI models, but to the extent they say that, it's kind of like in the social media context where like you upload a photo to Instagram and Instagram's like, well, we can do whatever we want to do with this. But you still own the rights. I feel like that's kind of the similar approach they're taking in the AI context, except they're saying, you know, when you upload your works to this algorithm and we can crunch it all into our little algorithm, you know, we have the right to copy it, do whatever we need to perform what we need to with our business, with providing services to you, to other users. So to that extent, it gives them sort of a broad use license, but I don't think in that language alone, as I understand it. Again, I haven't read the actual terms themselves, but it doesn't sound like, you know, there's exclusivity issues in terms of you going out with your script to other distributors or to others, and so I think it is sort of more akin to those social media.
But I heard though that if somebody else then, so if Kimberly says, oh, I need a script, ChatGPT, that's about a couple arguing, it can just pull mine that I uploaded to get it to summarize and spit that out for her.
It very well could, and well, and that's the kind of broad license that I well, they would argue it is. They would argue it is.
But that's where it's been educated. by you for that script. So now if anybody else puts it in, gives a few parameters, it's pulling from everything it learned from you to help me with what I learned and I put in. So now it's a hybrid of those. I mean, it's like chili. You just keep putting things in it.
Yeah.
Variation on a theme.
Chili. Exactly. I mean, I think, you know, you can think of it in two ways. You can think of it, AI, as sort of on the input side. What's happening is your work is being copied. So reproductions of your work is being made. So separate from sort of the output, what happens when somebody generates something and it looks like your script, separate from that issue, you know, them taking your work, using it to train their algorithm, implicates your copyright, right? Because they're copying the work. That's separate from the output side. So let's say a user prompts ChatGPT and it generates something very akin to your script. Definitely, if there's substantial similarity between that output and like your script, there's definitely a copyright infringement argument to be made. But I think this is what we also try to stress sort of in the AI context to creators of, hey, your works, when they're used to train AI models, they're being copied on the input side. So there's already infringement happening there. There also could be infringement on the output side if that looks substantially similar to your work. So these are two separate parts of the AI equation that we need to think about here.
But see, then I would argue on my legal side that if you willingly uploaded it, then you also gave away your rights.
Well, that's what they would argue.
I know they
that.
would.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's
Okay.
reasonable expectation. I mean, it's like having Alexa in your house. You have reasonable expectations of privacy, but now Alexa's in your house hearing everything you say. So you've changed your privacy rights by having Alexa in your house.
So there are.
It's a similar situation.
Yeah, so there are concepts in copyright law of implied license, right? By virtue of doing a certain action, you're implying that you give a license for someone else to use your work in a way that would otherwise be copyright infringement. So there are all these considerations, but I mean, from a practical standpoint, you know, when we're talking about kind of enforcement, at the end of the day, like, what rights do the creators have? And what can they do against, you know, AI companies who are using their works? And the answer right now is really being figured out again in the 40+ lawsuits that are happening. And I think there's a reason why there's 40+ lawsuits. Yeah. And a lot of them are class action lawsuits. Yeah. And this is not just in the US, this is all over the world too. I mean, I don't know if anybody's been following the UK, but the UK government kind of proposed this copyright law exception that would undermine creators' rights. And you saw an entire backlash from everyone in the UK creative community just come out and bash the government, like, what are you doing? So this is not an isolated issue, definitely. And kind of what we were talking about before of, I think in the context of AI, it's all of the problems we've seen on the internet and with past technologies, but like blown up exponentially and at a speed like we've never seen before. And particularly on the journalism front, you've seen them kind of argue these points over and over again, and suddenly with AI, it's become extremely dire in that situation. But yeah, I mean, to your original question, you know,
that ended
we'll
it
see.
for me.
Well, you made me think though, maybe you started business because just like right now it's in its infancy, you're not paying for any service to go get the ChatGPT opinion, but maybe there will be paid services with guardrails. Are they already there?
Yeah.
So that you could, like, you know, so it's
And I mean, even some of the big services, you can get different licenses, so some of them
to
you.
protect your.
Yeah, but of course you have to pay more money.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My last question is for you, actually, Joy, because I had a friend who was early on, like early Microsoft, and he, of course, said, AI will never be a thing. That's so science fiction-y. And I'm like, yeah, okay, right? My biggest issue with it is the dumbing down of society. And, you know, we saw that early on, we saw it in fast food restaurants where you could press a picture and you didn't have to know how to make change and things like that. And what I'm seeing in my circles even of people who have writing skills, they were brilliant writers, but now they're like, yeah, I don't write anything, I don't start. I write it, but I let them start it. I let whatever AI software start it. And even my brother-in-law, my sister called me, oh, my husband wrote a book. And I was like, no way! Like,
You did it this morning.
Since we last talked, I was like, wait. And she said, he's really good at the prompts. And I was like, so how do we deal with that part of it, the dumbing down? Like, I know you're using brilliance as a computer scientist to create the software, but what about the users?
I don't necessarily think it means dumbing down. I think the internet probably has increased literacy and not decreased it in general. You know, these kids, they sure can text.
Yeah, but they can't make whole words.
But they don't need to. And you know,
okay.
You know, and you know, sometimes I hear that and I think, you know, ever since they started writing words down, people just didn't have to memorize the Odyssey anymore. I mean, what a loss of intellectual capability that was. You know, but I don't know. I think that people, I don't think it is going to lead to a dumbing down. I mean, for one thing, I think a lot of the Gen Zers now are going to be a lot more media literate than most people of our age, just because having created this content so much, they're going to know just the limitations of the reality behind it.
I don't know. I think about medical stuff and like they don't know how to give medication. If the thing says it wrong, they're like, oh, 37 units, okay. Like they just.
You know, if you asked me to start a Model T, I couldn't do it.
I think taking off my copyright hat, you know, I have a lot of teacher friends who are very worried about sort of the logical implications of AI. And, you know, we were talking about how we learned, I don't know if anybody did this in school, but like sentence diagramming back in school, and how that was a very unique skill that we had learned from our teacher, and it has proven so useful in adult life, even if we don't like to admit it, but it's been so useful. And that's kind of like what's happening with these technologies of it's making certain processes efficient, but kind of to that point of like at what cost? Like it's just different now, but at what cost? Like what are we sacrificing together? And I don't really think anybody has the answer to that. Honestly,
and I mean another great things about human beings is just how plastic our brains are and how they will adapt to the environment. And so, you know, the environment is shifting quickly, and so will people.
But I think your point, Connie, is more about the fact that you don't need to use your mind as much as you did before to create, because the tools are there. And if you're good at the prompts, you can write a novel in a very short period of time without a lot of mental.
Well, you don't have to be good at creating in the same way, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're not creating in new ways. I mean, again, you know,
photography didn't kill painting.
Yeah.
Well, maybe it's a different technology and your mind still has to work. In the old days of
But
photography.
it was controversial. I mean, you know, movies were controversial because, and yet theater is still.
Although here's one of my hot takes on this. I think that as AI is able to create more and more stuff, I think the older art forms are the ones that are going to survive. Because there is, you know, I mean, there is some really interesting evidence that if you stand in the presence of a real Vermeer, it just has different effects on your brain than looking at an image. So I joke about that with my wife, who's a studio artist, that her media is going to outlive mine.
So, nearly a century ago, genius Charlie Chaplin made Modern Times, and it was, you know, a vision of the future where automation took jobs away from people and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, some people say, oh, that's propaganda and stuff. But, you know, now, I mean, that's just the way of life now. And it's,
That was the way of life then.
I know, but it's even more so now. I mean, but we still have some pushback because, like, I don't know how many years ago when they started doing the self-checkout, there was so much pushback with people like, I don't work here. I ain't doing self-checkout, right? I'm losing jobs. People are losing jobs because of it. So there is pushback on that kind of stuff. But what I was thinking, because, you know, I'm a movie person, I remember this movie so vividly called Simone. And Simone, like 20 years ago or so, was about a filmmaker who created an AI actress, and he did such a good job that she wins an Oscar. And they're like, get her to the Oscar. She could never do interviews. She could never go on talk shows. She couldn't do anything because she was not a real human being. Yeah. So they're like trying to destroy her image because they didn't know how to keep going with this AI image. And I just remember they created a movie where she played a pig and she was in the mud. And I just thought that was so hilarious.
Was it Pacino?
Yeah, yeah.
Pacino was the filmmaker.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, you know, we've all grown up watching cartoons, though.
Yeah, but then 20 years later, after that movie comes out, then we have this stuff with SAG, you know, and it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So that filmmaker is like Charlie Chaplin, thinking, oh, what's going to happen? He's already on top of it, you know.
Oh yeah.
But where are we going to be? Well, when we're all dead, it's going to be a whole different world.
Well, I mean, I heard some really educated speculation this week that the general AI is going to be here within 5 years.
Sentient. 5 years.
Define sentient. Nobody knows what sentience means for human beings, so we have no definition of what it means for computers. You know, until you can define human,
That's all I'm concerned.
until you can, no, but I mean that it will be able to do everything that a human can do sitting at their laptop. Replace anything, and that's going to be soon.
It's a human replacement. It was wrong.
Not every movie. R2-D2 and C-3PO are charming fellows.
One second, I want to make sure that, Julie, did you have something you wanted to just add?
So as a creator, and I post on social media and a website, I'm an artist, is there anything I can do if I don't want my work to be eaten by AI? Since I'll never know if they do eat it?
That's a great question. I think the tools are really limited right now, unfortunately. You know, AI companies, I think, always come out and say, well, you can use certain technical protocols like robots.txt or other kind of technical tags that prevent scraping. But the problem is, there's lots of problems with sort of the technical solutions that are out there right now. First of all, most of them weren't developed to address AI scraping for generative AI training. And then second, for some of these technical solutions like robot.txt, what it does is, you know, the whole point of posting your works on your website, right, is to show your portfolio, to bring licensees to you, to bring interested parties, right, to the business negotiation table. But a lot of these technical solutions that are there, what it does is, you know, by saying, okay, don't scrape my stuff, you're also saying, also don't promote my, you know, website in your search results. So it's kind of a Hobson's choice at the end of the day of like a rock and a hard place. Like, which one do you want?
I'll say robots.txt also works on a website or web page level and does not really apply if you are uploading content to Instagram.
Are there,
Exactly.
are there like terms and conditions for artists that they can sort of put on their page?
You
as a
could,
protection?
but you could, and you know, I think it is, I think, you know, again, also, I should have done this from the very beginning, but as a lawyer, I'm not giving any legal advice. But I think, you know, it's always best practice for creators to do all that they can, feasibly can, including like putting terms and conditions and saying things like, hey, my works are not available for scraping or for, generative AI training purposes, because under copyright law, if someone is put on notice that they're not allowed to use your work in a certain way and they do it anyway, that's willful infringement, and they can actually be penalized for that and pay more damages, like if they lose at the end of the day in a lawsuit. But I think it is, unfortunately, artists do have to kind of take this protective stance for their works, but there are no really good solutions out there. And there's actually a lot of talk out there about, like, for creators, right? Like, okay, why don't you just opt out? Why don't you just say no, right? Like, and the problem is exactly these reasons, but also the reason you pointed out with works just exist all over the internet in, like, unfathomable, innumerable number, like, of ways. Like a single song can, exist on a streaming platform. It can exist in an audiovisual work. It can exist in an advertisement. It can be pirated. Like, there's just so many ways you can't control your work on the internet. So it's not as simple as just saying no or, opting out. And unfortunately, the tools are limited. But I think from the creator's perspective, like, just kind of like do your best, and that's all we can do at this point. And I think, again, that's why transparency obligations are also really important. Because if you can hold AI companies accountable for, like, did you actually use my work or not, that's a really powerful tool to get them to kind of rein that back and say, ooh, well, maybe we shouldn't just use everything off the internet.
Would registering the copyright help also?
Registering the copyright would definitely help. I think registration is always a very personal business consideration, but registration helps a lot because without registration, you can't even go to court to enforce your rights. It's not required for copyright protections, but definitely a really useful tool. Yeah. There's transparency regulations in different states, but California definitely has a really good bill out there right now. And that's not just, like, out of thin air either. It's because they've, like, heard from their creator constituents about the issue. And I've talked with some creators in Maryland as well, and they're trying to get some messaging together to talk to their state legislature to talk about transparency issues. So yeah, definitely very recommend that.
Well, you all were fascinating, don't you all agree? I know it's a little, both fascinating and frightening, so Sherry, I'm with you there.
Yeah.
I was going to show that final clip from the Information Apocalypse, but that is available on YouTube, so I'm not going to show any more clips. It was only 1 minute, but look, it's an 8-minute thing on YouTube, the Information Apocalypse, and so after the event, even Melissa can send you all the link to it so that you all know what it is. But I want to thank our wonderful moderator, Hadley. And all of our panelists, Joe, Judith, Rachel, and Brian. And I also want to acknowledge our wonderful host this evening, DCTV Group. If you have questions about the space, go mob her, she can tell you all about it. It is fantastic space. We've got how many board members and people in the room? I was gonna say we've got a bunch of board members in the room. What is that, 5? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you, board members. 6? Oh, yes, Jackie's hiding behind the camera. And Jacquie. Yes, so our board comes out and supports, and I appreciate that. We have such a wonderful active board, and that's not usual for organizations. Normally it's the 80-20 and this. We rock that. Like, we're like 90% active or 95% active, and that 5% is shooting on a film. Really, like, we've got our super active board, and so that's who helped put this together. Board member Robin Farmer, whom you all heard from, and she couldn't be here due to health issues, but anyway, she sends her regards and thanks to you all, and thanks to you also, and thanks to you, Melissa. So. And that ends our evening. We do have another one coming up, another panel in May, and we're talking about how documentaries have amplified the voices of Native American and Indigenous people and created policy changes. So that's going to be fantastic. We'll get you information on that. In the meantime, eat the food, drink the wine, leave the building. Thank you so much.